Well, ready or not, 2024 is gone. 2025 is here. Hope you guys are doing well. Had some good holidays. But New Year's is a great time to think about all the events that have happened in the past year and to kind of reevaluate what went well, what didn't go well, how you can make improvements, set goals, reevaluate all that kind of stuff. I was thinking of all the goals and plans I've had, and I've had many financial goals and other types of goals. But what financial goals do you have? Do you have goals to be wealthy, and what you would do with wealth? Do you have goals to retire when you're 55 or 65, or maybe you'll never retire? Do you have goals for young men to find a good career and buy a house when you're 25 or 26? Do you know what it would take to buy a house? How much money do you need down? How much money do you need to be making a month in order to qualify for a house? How much of a house do you need for you and possibly a future wife? And what are you going to do until you can buy a house? You live at home, you can rent. Your parents okay with you living at home? You're making progress towards goals. Bunch of questions, to answer. But as I was thinking about houses, and it's very rare these days, especially someone younger, to have an option of being able to pay for a house all at once. Most people have to take out a 30-year mortgage, spreading out those payments over 30 years, 360 payments, because it's such a huge debt. Houses are so expensive that it's almost impossible for someone to save up the cash to do it. Or by the time they did it, they might be like in their 40s, 50s. So I've even heard of some people, because of the prices of houses, they're taking out 40-year mortgages. 40 years. That's just crazy. So very few people have that amount of cash set aside to pay for such a huge debt. What other debts are there in life besides financial debts that are so big that you should consider spreading it out over 30 years, spreading that huge debt out? Have you ever thought about a loved one dying? Isn't that such a huge burden to take on when someone dies? Do we plan? We plan financially, we plan physically for the future. Why can't we plan emotionally for those things that we know will happen? It really is dishonest to believe that a living person won't eventually die. I mean, the very definition of living means that eventually they will die. So how do you spread out that burden of knowing someone will eventually die? Could be tomorrow, could be today. How do you spread that huge emotional burden out over many years? Well, what you may consider doing is every time you have an interaction with this person, that you consider that possibility that it could be the last time that you see this person. That might be the last time I see my mom and my parents. It could be the last time I see my brother, or my son, or I don't have daughters, but if I did, it could be the last time I see them. And how would you act? Wouldn't you treasure another day with a loved one if you knew that they wouldn't be around? We already know they're not going to be around for a long time, forever. So it spreads out the difficulty and spread out the burden. Wouldn't that, if you plan today for what will eventually happen tomorrow, wouldn't that help spread out those peaks and valleys? What do most people use to deal with grief and pain? And I've done this, I've tried this with some of the grief that we've gone through. Most people just use, a fading memory and distraction to help deal with grief and pain. Those are weak tools. We realize that life a lot of times is filled with burden, difficulty, pain, suffering, and that the times of joy and peace and happiness are somewhat fleeting. So if we can take those events and hold on to them, spread them out over many years, while knowing that the pain and suffering is temporary, we can flatten out some of those peaks and those valleys. I've talked about a friend that I was very impressed with how he treated his mother as she was aging. She was in her 80s, and for years he moved in with his parents, taking care of first his dad, then his mom after he died, and caring for her 24 hours a day. He didn't sleep very well at night because she was up multiple times all night long, or periodically through the night. And then as soon as he was done with work, a lot of times, almost every night after work, he would drive her all over town, and she loved to go on rides in the car. He'd drive all over the place. He knew what was going to happen. Eventually she would die. He planned every day. He lived every day like it was a gift, spending time with her, making her last few years enjoyable and filled with good things, with spending time with him. And so when she eventually did die, I went to the funeral, and I could see how there was almost zero pain, zero grief. He had done the best that he could with the time he had with his mom. He planned for that eventual day. I watched some of the other family members show up to this funeral, and it was almost exactly the opposite. Great heartbreak, pain, suffering for the loss of somebody. They didn't take the time to spend that quality time with her while she was here. So plan. Can you plan for the future emotionally? Don't you do the same thing with hard physical things? Sorry, it's cold out here. My nose seems to be like a leaky faucet. Don't you do the same thing with hard physical things? I can remember, a few times I used to do a lot of biking on the road, a road bike, and my brother and some friends, we got together and did the Huntsman Cancer Ride. So it was a fundraiser for cancer research, and we did 75 miles on a bike. And if you ever spent that many hours on a bike, it's painful. So I would project, how it would feel having completed that race, and the satisfaction I would get from completing that race, into the current physical difficulty, and how it would feel in the shower and getting in bed, getting some rest. All of that enjoyment and relief into the current physical task, and I think it helped. Same thing in preparation for that ride and others. I would ride my bike from the house when we lived in Sandy up into Little Cottonwood Canyon, and it was 4 or 5 miles to get to the canyon, then another, and there were some good steep hills getting there, and then 7 miles from the mouth of the canyon to the top where Snowbird and Alta were, where they're at. And it is some of the most difficult climbing I've ever done. It's at least 7-8% grade the whole way, with sections that are 12 to 15% grade, which just grueling, difficult ride. And I would do the same thing. I would just try to project my mind into what it was going to feel like standing at the top of the canyon, or being at home, having just eaten a good meal, looking forward to that sense of accomplishment. And I remember standing on the top of the canyon a few times, and I was surprised at the amount of endorphins that just overcomes you as you have that sense of accomplishment. So you can use that. That's a tool. You know, as far as financial goals, I remember painting after work. I would do these side jobs for painting in order to save money for a house, for a down payment on a house. And I would, you know, evenings, weekends work painting, or I would take time off, vacation time from work, to do these side jobs so we could save up for a house. And same thing, in the middle of that, it's very difficult, hard work. Painting is, especially new construction. And I would just think about the end goal. This is why I'm doing it. This is how much money I'll get from this job. It'll put us this much closer to that, you know, 20% goal that we had, putting 20% down on a house. And, you know, picture living in the house, picture being at the title company, signing loan documents, and having a sense of accomplishment, knowing I'd saved, my wife and I had saved a bunch of money to make it work. And how we were not spending money on extra things, fancy cars, going on fancy vacations. As that account grew, we started to get $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in that account. And all of the thoughts you start having, well, I could go out and pay cash for a nice car. I could go on a nice vacation. And to put all that aside, say this is the reason we're doing this, and we're going to stay on that road. Same thing with raising kids. You know, why can't you? It's very difficult. Kids are some of the most challenging tasks you'll take on, raising children. Why can't, during those years of toil, why can't you project some of the future joy that you'll have seeing your kids grow and be raised as responsible citizens, having hopefully families of their own, the joy that you'll feel? Why can't you project some of that joy into the years of difficulty and toil and raising them? And because of the difficulty, I've heard many young people say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have kids. In this world, it's too expensive. It's too difficult. It can't be done. I'm not doing it. Just remind you that it's true that the things that are the hardest in your life will later, as you succeed, become the source of some of the greatest happiness and joy you also receive in life. So, 2025 is here. Live your life with greater abundance. Plan for the future. Plan for life. And plan for death.